The Xbox release is coming fast for Baldurs Gate 3, so I wanted to collate some of the lesser known tips, tricks, secrets, and more for the game that you should know about. We'll cover hidden buffs, combat mechanics, patch changes, and more. Let's go! Let me know any that I may have missed or that you have in the comments down below so we can all help each other out. So this is things that I may have covered before, plus some other things that I haven't, and I just wanted to collate everything into one video so that if you're returning to Baldur's Gate, you've got a bit of a refresher, or say if you're playing for the first time on Xbox, you've got a bunch of really interesting tips that you will know. We'll start with one of the most common annoyances, I think, or at least for me, and that's inventory management. So you're going to pick up a ton of things in this game. There's just constantly things to pick up, and you're going to be moving it between all of your characters and just like make sure you're not over encumbered and all that stuff. One of the really good tips, like the best tip across the board, is that things like your keys that you pick up or any, food and supplies, as well as any alchemy items, will automatically go into the keychain, the supply pack, and the alchemy pouch. However, this doesn't always happen, and sometimes they can get like pulled out because of various quests, or they just like don't happen. What you can actually do is move a keychain, the supply pack, or the alchemy pouch into a inventory, and it will automatically scoop up any of those items that are within that inventory and put them into that pouch. Now this only works for these three specific things. So supply pack for all of your, your supply items that you would use for your long resting, so all the food and everything. Keys are obviously for keys, and alchemy pouch is for all of your alchemy stuff. The alchemy one is definitely one of the better ones that this works for, because you'll pick up a ton of like herbs and everything throughout the playthrough, and being able to scoop these up into a pouch very easily is super valuable. Something else to point out as well is that any of like your camp supplies that go into like that supply pouch, that they should actually just go into your traveler's chest, because your traveler's chest will be accessed when you go to long rest. So anything that's there, so you don't have to actually carry all of that extra weight, and they can be pretty heavy, especially all the food items and stuff when you've got heaps with you. So putting them in your traveler's chest is a good way to not have to sort of worry about that whole process. You can also like pick up the containers that you find, like say backpacks or any sort of pouches you find throughout the world. Sometimes you can just like pick them up and just use them as carrying containers. I like to do this for things like scrolls and that sort of a thing, because they just take up a lot of space in your inventory. It would just be nice if they didn't for one, but you can sort of put them all into like one backpack and like whack them on Gale or something like that, just so you don't have to carry them and see them all of the time. You can also pick up chests and store them at your camp. Say for example, if you are out of lockpicks, or you just like fail the check on everyone, you can just pick up the chest and send it to your camp and do a very similar thing, right? You can just then pull it out at your camp and then be able to actually lockpick it. And in this way, you may have also noticed that your traveler's chest has unlimited carry weight, so you can just fill that bad boy up with everything that you don't necessarily need to carry on you. So any armor, weapons, supplies, etc., you can just dump it in there. And speaking of that carry weight, if you press tab, you'll be able to bring up everyone's inventory together. It's just a great way to manage your inventory when you are on PC, so you can move things between them. Now you don't actually have to move something into a companion's inventory in order to actually like use it, right? If you have someone else selected, you can actually still use something from someone else's inventory. Just pay attention to the name that it says in brackets, right? Like say if you're trying to secret potion or something like that. And if you click the equipped symbol on the inventory screen, you can actually see all of the items that can be equipped into that specific slot, so you don't have to hunt through your inventory list to try and find specific things. This doesn't include inactive companions or your camp chest. Like this should absolutely include your camp chest though, right? Larian, you listening? Please make this include your camp chest. Like I don't want to have to carry 20 pieces of armor around just because I like to change my build every day. But this is like super helpful, right? So I use this all the time when I'm trying to like figure out what I want to use for my builds. I essentially just like put everything that I have on all of my companions and then figure out what sort of equipment I want to use, and that's like the best thing to do. With patch 5 that launched literally the day after I recorded this video, you can now access your companions' inventories without needing to first add them to your party. There's a new camp companions option in the bottom left when you're at camp. Now this will only allow you to equip and move items from their inventory, but it doesn't change what I mentioned earlier, in that when you're looking at those equip slots, you won't actually see items from your inactive party members or your traveler's chest in the equip slots. Baby steps, right? Let's move on to another massive topic, and that's these hidden buffs. And it's really all comes down to these like ritual spells and this concept of like camp casters. So every day that you go out, you've got a bunch of companions that just stay at your camp, and it's important that you can actually use them, right? Like there's no reason why you can't equip them into your active party for a brief amount of time to say use certain spells that last until your next long rest. What I would highly recommend to do is go to Withers and grab a hireling that's either a cleric or a wizard, and then multi-class them them into the other one, especially a transmutation wizard, and we'll cover why in a little bit. But when you do this, you'll be able to pick up these ritual spells. Now, the main one here is really Long Strider to increase your movement speed by 3 meters until your next long rest. But you can also grab Aid to give you temporary HP, and when you upcast Aid, you'll get more temp HP. So the further you get in the game, this still becomes valuable, and it's just like free HP, right? And because you're doing this on someone that's going to stay at your camp, you're not wasting any spell slots for that, right? So you can do that in that way. So anything that has that until long rest, like it lasts for that long, and isn't a concentration spell, you'll be able to use that. And then once you remove that party member from your active party, it doesn't matter because it's still being cast and it's not a concentration spell. You can do this with other things, like there are other ritual spells like Featherfall and Enhanced Leap and stuff, but they don't last until long rest, so they're not as useful. But say if you need them, you can have someone at your camp that you could quickly switch in and out of your party to use. Even dialogue spells like Speak to the Dead or Speak with Animals, Detect Thoughts, those sort of spells as well. Having a cleric and a wizard sort of combo for this is best because you get aid from the cleric line plus a few other spells there, as well as the wizard picks up all the other ritual spells. But the main reason you want to go the transmutation wizard is because of their class feature that will allow you to craft 2 potions instead of 1 with alchemy when you pass a medicine check. Now, this is really valuable because when we talk about potions, our next topic, there are some absolutely insane potions that just give you so much value in terms of buffs, right? Like you can obviously do things like make grenades and that sort of a thing, but the main benefits here in the early game would be the potion of speed, which is essentially a free win condition. Not only does it give you free movement speed, it also gives you an additional action in combat, right? So we've talked about in a lot of my multi-class builds about how attacking multiple times per turn is just super valuable. Now with the potion of speed, it gives you an extra action to use, so it's essentially a free action surge every turn while it lasts. Now once it does expire, you'll get lethargic, which does have its own debuffs, but you get this benefit very easy, and but most times like these encounters end before that effect wears out. Alternatively, as you get further in the game, you've got Bloodlust, which is like even better. So when you defeat an enemy, you get a temporary HP bonus as well as another action for that turn, right? So if you in like the later games when we're talking about these builds, we can attack like 8 times per turn with 1 action, right? You are obviously going to defeat an enemy in that turn. If you focus fire on someone, then you get another action, and then you can just attack another 8 times, right? Like these potions are absolutely incredible, and they're just a couple of them, right? Like there's Bark Skin to increase your armor class, and plenty of others that just do these really valuable things. So alchemy is something to not be slept on, right? It was only added with the full release of the game, and it's absolutely beneficial to use for crafting these sort of amazing benefits that really help with some of those late game bosses. So highly recommend. Another fun tip is about passives and their general like willingness to make things better. So one thing to think of, right, is non-lethal attacks. Now you can do this and enable this to knock out enemies rather than actually killing them. You have to like knock them out with martial weapons. You can't like knock them out by smacking them in the face with a fireball or something, right? That doesn't really work. But if you knock enemies out, they will still survive those attacks, which in some scenarios is actually beneficial. There are certain boss encounters as well as different outcomes to quests that this is important for, which I won't spoil, but just be thinking about that if something is important that you say, no, don't kill me for whatever reason. But there are other reasons to use passives as well, right? Like you can turn off weapons that have lights. Like some weapons just have like a massive light on them. This makes stealth really hard because it's literally a light coming out of your weapon, and in your passives you can turn this off, and you can see that this actually changes how obscured you are like when you're stealth. There are other buffs and like class specific features as well that will show up in here that you'll often get as you level out your classes with your class features. So just important to remember that you have that passives tab and be thinking about that as you're entering in boss fights and encounters, because in some cases, like some of the monk class features, you can just get like free damage from enabling certain passives. So just consider that as well. With all of that gear in your inventory, you will spend a ton of time talking to vendors. Now there's a few important things to remember here. When you start a conversation with a vendor, the prices will be calculated based off the character that you start that conversation with, and not only their attitude with that specific character, but also their charisma stat. So in this example here, you can see when I'm talking to this vendor with Will that his charisma is obviously a lot higher than Astarian's, and you can see the price difference for this longbow is significantly different. Even though they have different attitudes as well, you can see that that stat difference, just because of that charisma difference, is also different as well. You can increase their attitude towards you by selling items for less than they're worth, or just giving them items for free, and then that does calculate into getting you items back in terms of bartering for like less. But for the most part, you'll be moving through the game at a rate that you don't necessarily need to do this. Like, I would really just be talking to people with your highest charisma stat, and if that fails, you can just steal their inventories, right? Like, if you have a character that's quite stealthy, you can stealth behind them and steal anything that you like. And if you're also wanting to sell more items, vendors' gold does refresh when you either level up or you long rest, and their gold level will refresh. Combat is the last key part of Baldur's Gate we haven't really touched on. Now, one of the key things to remember is surface synergies. So if there's water on the ground, you can electrify it. My Storm Warden multi-class is absolutely brilliant for this, so go and check out that video. You can also put things on the ground like grease or oil and set them ablaze. Speaking of putting grease on oil on the ground, if you have a backpack in your inventory, speaking of the method we talked about earlier, how you can carry backpacks, you can put explosives and bombs and all that stuff in them, throw the backpack, and it will throw all of those items at once, so you don't have to throw them individually. And then with, say, just hitting them with one sort of ranged attack, you can actually activate all of those effects at once. Now, this doesn't do heaps of damage, right? It sounds like it should do like a massive amount of damage and explosions and all that kind of stuff. And it does do that. Like, putting grease and fire in there is obviously great because you can create like a fire hazard on the ground. But if you have a lot of bombs and grenades that apply status effects, you can do this to apply all of those status effects at once. So it's a great like fight start opener, so you can apply those status effects to everything sort of in that surrounding area and then attack from there. Also, high ground is obviously amazing for ranged characters. It's always valuable. You can create your own high ground by stacking crates and climbing on top of them. Don't forget to examine enemies all of the time. It's one of the best things you should do in every combat encounter, because basically every enemy has some sort of resistance and you won't know about it unless you use the examine feature. So obviously use that. It'll help you decide what types of damage to use against them, what type of spells to use, and it will explain any of the unique buffs that any of these like unique enemies may have. So make sure you're right clicking and examining on all of these enemies. Larian have been regularly updating the game since launch with a number of patches that have come out, and they've actually added valuable things for you to think about if you're returning to Baldur's Gate or even playing for the first time. One of them is that there is a magic mirror at every single camp. This can be a little bit hidden, so make sure you're looking for it either on the map or just like running around to find it. This will allow you to change your appearance. Now, you can't change any of your race or any of that stuff because it's all linked to, you know, the role-playing aspects, but you can just like tweak your appearance here if you wanted to. You can also do this for hirelings as well, which is a massive buff that you can now actually change these hirelings so they can look a certain way. If you want to do that, you can also change their name there as well. Patch 5 also added a brand new epilogue with over 3,000 additional recorded lines that occurs 6 months after the main events from the game, where you can catch up with your companions and other people that you've met across your journey and find out what's been happening with them. This is in itself worth another playthrough or just booting up an old save to check it out, honestly, to see these different variations that can happen here. But this is a massive addition to Baldur's Gate 3 well after the launch, just for free. Like, it's huge. And there has been just an insane amount of bug fixes and like dialogue fixes and just new scenes and corrections being added. Like, there's been a lot of new scenes and changes to, say, Karlak and Minthara, the two companions. They've had plenty of fixes and changes as well. So this and everything else that's been added to the game is absolutely huge, right? There's too much to go through, and I wouldn't recommend reading all the patch notes because there is a lot there. But, you know, if you are returning to the game, you will notice some changes and things that have been updated. I've got tons more tips and builds and all that good stuff on the channel, including another video that covers even more unique tips and tricks and things you need to check out. So go and watch those videos. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.